Before you begin, this story is a journey into darkness, where fear is not just a reaction, but a part of you, lurking, waiting to consume you. Escape is an illusion. The voices, the figures, are not mere imagination. Once you step in, there's no turning back. The nightmare has already begun. There is no waking up. The cold winds whipped across the barren landscape, a harsh reminder that the world outside had forgotten what warmth felt like. It was late in the evening when Jason finally arrived at the old, decaying house, nestled on the outskirts of a town that nobody ever seemed to talk about. It wasn't a mansion, far from it. It was a factory, abandoned long ago, left to rot under layers of dust and rust. Jason had gotten the letter months ago. It was an invitation, an opportunity to leave his dull, predictable life behind. The letter had no return address, only a name. Mr. X, double quote. It was simple. Come and see the truth. You'll understand everything. Jason never could resist curiosity. And so here he was, standing in front of the crumbling concrete structure, unsure whether to step inside or turn back. The entrance was large, with heavy iron doors. His breath fogged in the icy air as he knocked on the door. A moment later, it creaked open, revealing a dark hallway within. There was no one to greet him, but he had no intention of turning back now. Inside, the atmosphere was thick, heavy with the weight of years of neglect. The air was suffocating, as though the building had been holding its breath for decades. Hello. Jason's voice echoed through the empty halls. No answer. But he was certain he heard something. Something faint, distant. A shuffle. A whisper. Mr. X? Jason called again. But this time his voice sounded much smaller. The silence returned, swallowing his words. With a sigh, he stepped forward into the unknown, a sense of dread creeping up his spine. As Jason made his way through the hallways, the space seemed to change. The walls, once grey and faded, now appeared to be lined with dark, almost unidentifiable stains. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long, as if they were alive, reaching for him. His mind was playing tricks on him. That's all it was. The isolation, the damp cold. His mind was being tortured by the atmosphere of the place. Nothing more. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it. A figure standing at the end of the hallway. A person or something like one, just standing there still, watching. Jason's heart raced. Who's there? His voice wavered now. The figure didn't move, didn't respond. He stepped closer, every instinct in his body screaming at him to run. But curiosity held him like an invisible chain. He had to know. The figure turned slowly, revealing a face that Jason could hardly comprehend. It was wrong. The eyes were too wide, too dark. The skin was stretched and pale, taut over a skeletal frame. And that smile, it was an unnatural, inhuman thing. Jason froze in terror. You shouldn't have come, the figure rasped, its voice low and guttural, as if it hadn't been used in years. Jason's breath caught in his throat. The figure's smile widened. You'll never leave, it whispered. The lights flickered above Jason's head, casting grotesque shadows. Panic surged within him. Without thinking, he bolted down the hallway, but the world around him began to twist and distort. The walls seemed to close in, the air growing thick and suffocating, the shadows crawling toward him. His footsteps echoed, rapid and erratic, but they seemed to be swallowed by the dark. It was no longer just the building that felt wrong. It was his mind. The line between reality and hallucination blurred. Was he dreaming? Had he somehow lost his grip on reality? He didn't know, but one thing was certain. Something in this place was waiting for him. And whatever it wasn't going to let him leave. Jason's breath came in sharp gasps as he stumbled through the dark, winding corridors. The floor creaked beneath him, threatening to collapse with each frantic step. His mind was spinning. Was he hallucinating? The figure, had it been real? No, it couldn't have been. Just a trick of the light, or his mind playing tricks. He pressed his back against the cold, rusted wall, trying to steady himself. His heart was pounding, drowning out every sound around him. The dim overhead lights flickered, casting long, twisted shadows in his peripheral vision. They seemed to move of their own accord. "Get a grip, Jason," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow, though the air was freezing. But the deeper he went, the more the reality seemed to shift. Was the building alive? Had it been watching him all along? His pulse quickened. The walls, they were breathing. They contracted and expanded as if pulsing with some unnatural rhythm. Jason rubbed his eyes, his panic growing. And then it started. A low hum filled the air. At first, faint, then growing louder, vibrating through his skull. It was hard to tell if it came from inside his head or from the walls. But soon it became clearer. Voices, inaudible whispers, too soft to understand, yet unmistakably human. They swirled around him, growing louder. Jason spun around, eyes darting in every direction, but the hallway was empty, too empty. Without warning, the lights flickered, flashing black and white. In those brief flashes, Jason saw them. Faces, thousands of them, embedded in the walls, hollow eyes, mouths frozen in silent screams, trapped in the very structure of the building. Jason staggered back, his body trembling uncontrollably. He could hear the whispers, now clearer, inside his mind. "It's too late. You can't escape. We never left. We're still here, just like you will be." His stomach churned, vision blurring. His legs felt heavy, unresponsive. He wanted to run, but his feet were frozen. "Stop. Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Suddenly, a high-pitched sound pierced the air, sending a shock through his body. The lights flickered again, then went out, plunging the corridor into darkness. Jason froze. His ears rang with the silence. Then, from the far end of the hallway, came a slow, deliberate scraping sound. Something dragging itself. He turned toward it, pulse hammering in his throat. From the shadows, something moved. Something huge, twisted, writhing limbs dragging it closer. Jason's heart nearly stopped. It was coming closer, laughing. A deep, guttural laugh that made his bones rattle. His breath hitched. For a moment he couldn't move. The thing, whatever it was closing in. And then he saw it. Its face, or what had once been a face. A melting, rotting mask of flesh, eyes burning with an incomprehensible hunger. It stopped in front of him. The creature tilted its head, studying him, its grotesque smile stretching impossibly wide. You're real," Jason whispered, unable to form a full sentence. The thing reached out, its hand, or what remained of it, gripping his arm with unearthly strength. Jason screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the suffocating darkness. It didn't let go. As his grip tightened, the whispers grew louder. Jason's mind splintered. Reality warped around him, the walls stretching and twisting as though alive, suffocating him. And then, as suddenly as it appeared, the thing was gone. The cold grip vanished, and the dark hall was empty. But Jason wasn't alone. The whispers were louder now, clearer, inescapable. We never left. You'll never leave. He tried to move, but his legs wouldn't obey. The ground beneath him felt as if it were shifting, pulling him into something dark and endless. Then, a voice. Mr. X, are you ready to see the truth now, Jason? Jason opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The walls closed in, shadows swallowing him whole. And then, there was nothing. Jason could no longer distinguish where his thoughts ended and the darkness began. His mind had shattered into countless fragments, each one grasping at a thread of reality that slipped further from his reach. The heavy, suffocating darkness wrapped around him, pulling him deeper, tighter into the twisted maze of this place. The whispering never stopped. It had become a part of him, a constant presence inside his skull, gnawing at his sanity with every breath. You're one of us now. There's no escape. The voices echoed, distorted, mocking his every desperate thought. Jason staggered down the endless hallway, his legs trembling as though they could give out at any moment. The walls, pulsating with that sickly rhythm, seemed to lean in closer with every step. He wasn't sure how long he had been walking, how long he had been trapped in this nightmare. Time didn't exist here. In his disoriented state, Jason thought he saw something move in the periphery of his vision. Shadows. No, not shadows. Figures. They darted between the cracks in the walls, their eyes gleaming with hunger. Were they real? Or was this just another hallucination? He couldn't trust himself anymore. His breathing became ragged, shallow, as he collapsed against the cold stone floor. His head spun, and he could feel the oppressive weight of something unseen bearing down on him. Something was watching him. No, it had always been watching him. He could feel his presence now crawling through his skin, making his blood run cold. He clenched his fists and tried to stand, but his body betrayed him. His mind screamed at him to get up, to move, to run, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. It was the sound that pulled him from his daze. The faintest scrape, a dragging noise coming from behind him. Jason whipped around, his heart hammering against his ribs. But there was nothing. Nothing but the pitch-black emptiness that stretched endlessly before him. Then he heard it again, closer this time. The sound of something dragging, something moving. Jason's breath caught in his throat, and his body finally responded. He pushed himself to his feet, stumbling forward in a wild panic. He couldn't let whatever it was catch him. He couldn't. But as he moved, the sound followed, growing louder and louder, more distinct. A wet, slithering sound. Something was following him. He glanced behind him. The hallway was still empty, but the oppressive feeling of being watched only grew stronger. Something was moving in the dark, its presence creeping closer, inch by inch. Jason's heart thudded in his chest as his feet pounded against the floor. He wasn't sure if he was running towards safety or deeper into the nightmare. But he had no choice. There was nowhere else to go. A low, guttural laugh echoed through the corridor. Jason froze, the sound sending a wave of cold dread through his veins. He knew that laugh. He didn't need to turn around to know who or what it was. The walls trembled. The floor beneath him vibrated, sending shockwaves of fear through his bones. Then the voice, that same voice, rang out in the silence. "You can't escape, Jason. We'll find you." Jason's stomach lurched. His legs gave way, and he collapsed to the ground, shaking uncontrollably. His pulse roared in his ears as his mind splintered further. And then, from the corners of his vision, he saw them again. The figures. They were no longer shadows. They had shape now. Twisted, deformed shapes that crawled toward him on all fours, their eyes glowing with malice. Their faces were contorted, half melted, like something out of a nightmare. They moved with unnatural speed, slithering and crawling along the walls, closing in on him. Jason's mouth went dry. His hands trembled as he tried to push himself backward, but the figures were already too close. He could hear their breath, slow, wet, labored, growing louder with every passing second. He could feel the walls closing in, their oppressive weight bearing down on him as if the very building itself was alive, hungry. The figures reached out, their long, twisted fingers grazing his skin. Jason screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the suffocating darkness. He was trapped. The world around him was fading, everything slipping away like water through his fingers. His vision blurred as the figures closed in, their fingers wrapping around his throat, tightening with inhuman strength. He clawed at their hands, his breath coming in shallow gasps. There was no escape, no salvation. This was how it ended. The last thing he heard was the laughter again. Louder this time, filling his ears, his mind, his soul. The end. Jason's world was no longer a world of flesh and bone. It was something else, something darker, colder, a place where nightmares walked with open eyes. The hands had released him, but they were still there, lingering, burning his skin with their ghostly touch. The darkness pressed in on him, thick and suffocating, like the weight of the ocean. But the silence was the worst part. It was not the dead silence of peace. It was the silence of something waiting, something that had never left, something that had been there all along. Jason could feel its presence now, even if he couldn't see it. It was as the air around him, in the very walls, the ground beneath his feet. The shadow that followed him had merged with him, becoming part of his soul. And no matter how hard he tried to pull away, it was always there. It whispered his name, its breath warm and foul against his ear. Jason. The voice hissed, a familiar guttural sound that made his blood run cold. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But he had heard it. He had heard it too many times to ignore. He stumbled forward, each step hesitant, unsure of what awaited him in the consuming blackness. He didn't know where he was anymore. There was no more time, no more space. Only the sound of his own breathing, ragged and uneven, filling the emptiness. The ground underfoot was uneven, crumbled in places as if the building itself was decaying, falling apart. A low growl echoed from somewhere deeper within the shadows, and Jason froze. He wanted to scream, but his voice was trapped inside him, lodged in his throat like a forgotten memory. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, and his hands trembled as he reached out, feeling for something, anything to ground him. There had to be a way out. There had to be. Suddenly, the growl grew louder, more insistent, until it was almost deafening. The walls vibrated with the sound, shaking like a living thing. The air turned colder, and Jason's breath caught in his throat. He turned his head, his eyes scanning the inky blackness, looking for any sign of movement, any hint of what was coming. Then he saw them. Just a flicker at first, shapes, indistinct, shifting in the dark corners of his vision. But as his eyes adjusted, the shapes became clearer. Figures, dark, hunched figures, moving like predators stalking their prey. They were close now, so close. Jason's pulse quickened, and panic surged through him. The figures were not shadows anymore. They were real. They were tangible. Each one had grotesque, gnarled limbs, twisted faces locked in expressions of pain and hunger, their eyes burning with an unnatural light. Their mouths were open, revealing jagged, razor-sharp teeth. They were smiling. They were hungry. He ran. His legs moved on their own, pumping beneath him as his mind screamed for escape. His feet slid across the crumbling floor, the sound of his breath, desperate and ragged, the only thing that filled his senses. The growls behind him grew louder, the figures closer. Their twisted forms swayed and shifted in his peripheral vision, their movements jerky, unnatural. Jason could feel their eyes on him, watching him, hunting him. He couldn't outrun them. They were faster, stronger. Their shadows stretched across the walls like claws reaching for him. Jason. The voice, that same voice, whispered in his ear again, sending a shiver through his spine. Suddenly, the ground beneath him gave way. He screamed as he fell, his body plummeting into the darkness below. His hands scrambled against the air, searching for something, anything to break his fall. But there was nothing. The world spun as he tumbled into an abyss, his body twisting, disoriented. Then everything stopped. The sounds of his fall faded into an eerie silence. Jason's heart was racing, his chest heaving with fear, but the silence that followed was deafening. He opened his eyes. He was lying on the ground, but it wasn't the same place. He wasn't in the hallway anymore. The air smelled thick, stale, like old stone and mildew. The walls were different, covered in strange symbols, scrawled hastily, almost desperately. The floor was cold, wet, slick with something Jason couldn't identify. And then he heard it. A low, hollow chuckle echoed through the room, as though the very walls were laughing at him. The sound was deep and cruel, echoing through his skull like the beating of drums. You thought you could escape. The voice was no longer just a whisper. It was a roar, reverberating around him, filling his senses. The shadows grew thicker, darker, wrapping around him like a suffocating cocoon. Jason pushed himself up, his limbs trembling with exhaustion and fear. There was no way out. There was no escape from this place, from whatever had been chasing him, from whatever had claimed him. It was here, and it was only a matter of time before it took him, before it made him one of them. Jason's body shook uncontrollably as he forced himself into a sitting position. His limbs felt detached, numb, as if he were no longer in control. Pain radiated through his body, gnawing at him from the inside. His chest heaved with shallow breaths. The air in the room seemingly sucked away, leaving him gasping. The walls around him pulsed with an eerie glow, casting grotesque shadows that stretched and writhed, like the fingers of some unseen beast closing in. His pulse quickened, the air growing heavier, suffocating him with its oppressive weight. Jason could feel something watching him, its presence thick, hovering just behind him. He pushed himself to his feet, his legs barely holding him up. His hands scraped along the cold stone walls, their dampness seeping into his fingertips. He had to move. He had to escape this place. But then he saw them. In the corner of his vision, two pairs of eyes glowed at him from the shadows. They were not human, too large, too bright, their pupils wide and unblinking, reflecting something unnatural. They stared at him from where the darkness merged with the walls. Jason froze. His heart thudded painfully, deafening in his ears. He couldn't look away from those eyes. They weren't just watching him. They were waiting. He tried to move, but his legs were paralyzed, his body betraying him. The eyes blinked slowly, and in that moment, the air shifted. The shadows grew more solid, wrapping around him like a net. The walls seemed to close in on him, alive, hungry. "Who are you?" Jason whispered, his voice trembling. The eyes blinked again, narrowing as if considering his question. Suddenly a sound, scraping, dragging, reached his ears. Faint, but growing louder. A chill ran through Jason's veins as dread swelled in his chest. He turned his head slowly. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was unnaturally tall, with long, thin limbs twisted at unnatural angles. Its pale, translucent skin stretched tight over its bones, the very sight of it unnerving. It moved in jerky, mechanical steps, dragging its feet across the floor, each step more disturbing than the last. Its eyes, the same glowing eyes, remained unblinking in the darkness. Jason's breath caught as the figure drew closer, its hollow gaze fixed on him. "You shouldn't be here," the figure rasped, its voice deep and guttural. Jason stumbled back, but the room was too small, too suffocating. The shadows were closing in, and the walls, no longer just walls, were alive. They were alive, and they were reaching for him. "Please," Jason gasped, his throat dry, words barely escaping. The figure tilted its head, its eyes narrowing with an unreadable expression. "Please what?" Jason's desire to scream, to run, surged, but his body wouldn't obey. The darkness pressed in, suffocating him. He felt the weight of those eyes crawling over his skin, invading his thoughts, twisting his mind. "You can't leave," the figure whispered again, its voice like sandpaper scraping against his eardrums. "Not until you're one of us." The eyes glowed brighter, their light pulsing, relentless. Jason's heart raced, terror flooding every fiber of his being. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His mind was filled with visions, flashes of faces, hollow eyes, silent screams. "Is this what I've become?" Jason's thoughts spiraled into madness. "Please," Jason croaked, his voice a broken whisper. But the figure only smiled. It wasn't a smile of kindness or malice. It was a smile of hunger. Jason felt something stir within him, a pull, a longing to reach out, to sink into the darkness that had consumed him. The figure was no longer separate. It was a part of him. He felt its hunger, its need, and a terrifying part of him wanted to embrace it. He wanted the release, the escape from the agony that gnawed at his soul. The air thickened around him, and Jason felt the darkness consume him, seep into his very being. But then, just as suddenly, the vision shattered. The darkness recoiled, pulling away as if something else had intervened. The figure's eyes widened in disbelief. It took a step back, its gaze still locked on Jason, before it turned and melted back into the shadows, as though it had never existed. Jason's mind spun. He collapsed to the floor, shaking violently, his heart hammering, breath coming in short, erratic gasps. What had just happened? What had he seen? The silence returned, stifling. But the air, it felt different, colder, as though a new, darker presence had taken the place of the figure. Jason's eyes darted around the room, desperately seeking any sign of what was happening, but there was nothing. Only the whispers in the shadows, only the eyes, always watching, always waiting. Jason's pulse still pounded in his ears as he forced himself to stand. The room was silent now, save for the soft hum of the oppressive air around him. but it wasn't comforting. No, it was suffocating, thick with something dark, something that pressed against his chest with every breath he took. He stumbled toward the door, his vision blurry, his legs unsteady. His fingers grazed the cold metal handle, but before he could open it, a voice, soft, almost tender, whispered his name. Jason. His entire body went rigid. That voice. It wasn't like the one from before. It was sweet, familiar, like a lullaby that brought no comfort. It was the voice of someone he knew. A shiver ran down his spine, his breath catching in his throat. He turned around slowly, his eyes scanning the dark corners of the room, searching for the source of the voice. But there was nothing. No figure, no shape, just the empty, suffocating air. Jason! The voice called again, closer now. He spun around, heart hammering. There, in the corner of the room, standing in the shadows, was a figure. A woman. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and empty, glowing faintly in the darkness. She stepped forward, the floor creaking under her feet, and for the briefest moment, Jason thought he saw a flicker of recognition in her hollow gaze. "Is it really you?" he whispered, barely able to breathe. The woman didn't respond. She only stared at him with those cold, unblinking eyes. Jason's heart twisted in his chest as a horrible thought surged in his mind. Could it be? No, it couldn't be. "Who are you?" Jason croaked, his voice shaking with fear. But the woman didn't answer. Instead, she slowly raised her hand, her fingers elongated, like claws, reaching toward him with an unnatural slowness. The sound of her fingers scraping against the air filled the room, a dry, grating noise that made Jason's skin crawl. "Come closer," she whispered. "Come closer, Jason." His legs moved on their own. He wanted to scream, to run, but he couldn't. His body betrayed him. He stepped forward, his feet dragging across the floor, drawn toward her like a puppet on a string. With every step, the shadows around him grew thicker. The air grew colder, as if the very room was rejecting him. He could feel his sanity slipping, the whispers in the darkness growing louder, until they were deafening. "Closer," the woman repeated, her voice growing softer, more seductive. "Come to me, Jason." He was almost there now, mere inches away from her. But before he could reach out, her face twisted into something hideous. Her eyes, once empty, were now filled with an inhuman hunger, her lips curling into a smile that made Jason's stomach churn. In one fluid motion, her hand shot forward, and she grabbed him by the throat. Her grip was like iron, tightening with each passing second. Jason's vision began to blur as he gasped for air, clawing at her cold fingers, but it was no use. Her smile widened as she pulled him closer, her face now inches from his. "You should have never come," she hissed, her voice no longer sweet but full of malice. "You're mine now." Jason's body shook violently, his thoughts spiraling. His entire existence felt like it was slipping away, consumed by the darkness that surrounded him. His lungs burned as the last bit of air was squeezed from his chest. His vision darkened, his mind fading. But just before everything went black, he heard the whisper again. Closer. And then nothing. Jason's mind swirled as he woke, disoriented, with an overwhelming feeling of weightlessness. His eyes fluttered open, but he saw nothing. Not the usual darkness, but a void, a complete absence of light or shape, as if the world itself had ceased to exist. His chest rose and fell erratically, his breath sharp and shallow. He was alive, but why? He had felt the life drained from him. He had been suffocated, pulled into some terrible, nameless place. But now he was here. The air was cold, almost painfully so, biting into his skin. He could feel it, cold that seeped into his bones, making him shiver uncontrollably. His body was stiff, aching. Something was wrong. Nothing felt familiar. The sensation in the air was different from before, a deeper, more suffocating kind of silence. "Where am I?" he whispered to himself, his voice lost in the abyss. As if in response, a sound echoed through the void. A whisper. His name. "Jason." The voice was low and crackling, like static on an old radio, but unmistakably the same. The same voice from before, the voice that had haunted him. The voice that had almost ended him. His stomach churned. His limbs froze in fear. He twisted around trying to make sense of his surroundings, but there was nothing. No walls, no floor, no ceiling. Just this endless blackness. How was this possible? Where was he? Was this death? Another whisper. Closer now. "Jason, I've been waiting." It was a woman's voice, familiar. The same voice, but it wasn't the same. Something had changed. The air around him grew heavier. The whispers swelled and shifted, swirling like a storm, louder, faster, as if they were closing in. Jason took a step backward. His foot didn't hit the ground. He panicked, flailing his arms in every direction, but there was nothing. No point of reference, no escape. "Where are you?" he cried out, his voice trembling. He couldn't see her, he couldn't see anything, but the whispers, they were everywhere. They filled his ears, his mind, suffocating him. "Jason, come closer." The whisper was seductive, mocking. He felt it brush against the back of his neck, a cold breath, like something unseen was lingering right behind him. "Please, stop." His voice cracked as he took another step forward, feeling the emptiness stretch beneath him, offering no sense of direction. "You're mine now, Jason." The voice was clearer now, cold and dripping with venom. "The darkness will never let you go." A sharp pain pierced through Jason's chest. He gasped, clutching his ribs, but the pain didn't subside. It grew, blossoming inside him like 1,000 needles pushing through his skin, tearing at his insides. He dropped to his knees, clutching at his chest, but the pain intensified, ripping through him in waves. Why are you doing this?" Jason managed to choke out through his agony. "Because you came," the voice replied, now impossibly close. "You came into my world." Jason's breath came in ragged gasps as he staggered to his feet, his vision blurring. His mind was spinning. The whispers had become unbearable. His chest felt like it was going to explode. "Jason." The voice purred again, this time directly in his ear. "You'll never leave." Suddenly the pain ceased. The whispers stopped. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. For a moment, Jason dared to hope that it was over, that whatever nightmare this was had ended, but it hadn't. Jason's vision cleared. He was no longer standing alone in the darkness. Slowly, painfully, he became aware of something else in the void. A shape, a presence. It was there, just beyond his reach, lurking in the corners of his mind. He could feel it, creeping closer. The shadows, the emptiness. And then he saw it, a figure, a silhouette hanging in the blackness, just out of sight. A figure he recognized. His heart skipped a beat. The figure moved closer, a shadow, no face, just a vague outline of a human shape. And then he heard the whisper again. "Jason, you'll never escape." And the blackness began to close in. Jason screamed, but it was drowned in the growing silence. And just as the darkness wrapped around him, he realized he was not alone. The voice wasn't his. It never had been. Jason's pulse raced, his hands shaking uncontrollably as the darkness swirled around him. His body was trapped, frozen in place, as if the void itself had taken hold of him. His breath was shallow, ragged. There was no escape from this twisted nightmare. The shadow moved closer, inch by inch, its presence suffocating, crushing every ounce of hope left in him. It was no longer a vague shape in the void. It was real. It had form, substance, and a feeling of something wrong, of something ancient, malevolent, and hungry. Jason tried to scream, but the words didn't come. The air was thick, oppressive, and the whispers around him grew louder, like a chorus of voices, all calling his name, chanting it, pulling him deeper into the void. "Jason, you're mine now," the voice hissed, its tone dripping with malice. He felt the cold breath against his skin again, that familiar chill that sent a jolt of terror through his veins. The shadow grew larger, its form now unmistakable. It was no longer a vague outline, but a towering presence, a figure with elongated limbs, its face nothing but an abyss of black, empty space. Jason's heart hammered in his chest as he took a step back, but there was nowhere to go. The void stretched endlessly in all directions, swallowing him whole, trapping him in this nightmare. "Please." "No," Jason whispered, his voice barely audible. The figure reached out, its hand, a long, skeletal appendage, stretching towards him, fingers like claws. The darkness in the air thickened as it drew closer, the temperature dropping to an unbearable cold. "Begging won't save you," the voice said, its tone cruel. "You were always meant to be here." Jason felt the shadow's hand brush against his skin. The touch was icy, colder than anything he had ever felt before, sending an electric shock of terror through his entire body. He tried to pull away, but the hand gripped his arm with a force that made him cry out in pain. The whispers increased in intensity, a cacophony of voices swirling in his head, crashing into his thoughts, drowning him in their noise. "You'll never leave," the voice said again, almost mockingly, as the hand began to tighten around his wrist. Jason struggled, trying to break free, but it was no use. The darkness was alive. It was holding him captive, and there was no escape. As the hand tightened further, Jason felt his strength fading, his vision growing hazy. The pain was unbearable. He could feel his limbs growing numb, his body shutting down, as if the life was being drained from him, piece by piece. "Why?" he gasped, his voice trembling. "Why me? Why am I here?" The figure's empty face tilted slightly, as though it was amused by his question. The voice that came next was filled with a twisted satisfaction, the sound of something ancient, something malevolent. "Because you were chosen," it said, its voice deepening, resonating in the air. "You were always meant to be mine." The words pierced Jason's soul, the final blow that shattered his will. He had fought, he had struggled, but it was clear now. There was no escape from the darkness. There was no escape from it. The figure's hand tightened again, and Jason felt a searing pain shoot through his chest. His heart raced in its final beats, his breath shallow and erratic as the life slowly drained from him. He opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came. The darkness was swallowing him whole. The voices, the whispers, the figure, it was all consuming him. His mind cracked under the pressure of it all, and the last remnants of his consciousness faded into the abyss. And then, Nothing. The void was silent. Jason was gone, but the darkness remained forever. The last thing I remember was the cold. Not just the factory's chill, but a cold that seeped into my very being, extinguishing the last flicker of warmth. They said I was chosen. What a twisted, cruel joke. I don't know how long I've been here. Time has no meaning in this void. Just the constant whispers. They're softer now, weaving through the endless dark like forgotten dreams. A constant murmur, a haunting echo of what I became. I saw a truth so vast, so terrifying. It stripped me bare. It wasn't a truth of answers, but of unending questions, of a fundamental darkness that simply swallows everything. And now, I am part of it. A whisper among the whispers, a shadow among shadows, forever.